Welcome, welcome, welcome. Just a quick one today. My name is Josh, and welcome to Discourse 101. And today, one of the topics that I want to talk about is actually a topic that I actually spoke about, let's say maybe a month or two ago. I had recorded everything. The audio got messed up. The video was a bust. But the beauty of it is that in politics, an issue that was a few months ago is often still an issue that is present today. Now, before I get into it, please do not hold back on sharing your thoughts and feelings down below. Honestly, that is what this is all about, the discourse. And if I'm in the room and it's only my voice, then hopefully one day it could be your voices too that are joining me. But let's get into it. So, this video was actually inspired by a YouTube video that I was watching for Dan Carter and somebody on his YouTube channel. It wasn't the usual podcast that he's been doing, but it was one of those weekend specials, I believe, or Sunday specials, where he was with somebody else and they were discussing a topic, and I think it was something about how Tyra Banks and somebody from the DA are the same, or whatever the case is. But I will do some research and I will link that in the bottom. But it got me thinking. And what I want to pose today is, what exactly can we as political actors, citizens that are voting, etc., really expect when looking at massive projects that are being done? So this has been a issue that over the few months or so has actually gotten more and more acknowledgement and has been more spoken about and has seen the light of day, essentially. And the beauty of that is that politicians are aware that it's hard to sort of establish a long-term plan, establish a massive project, establish a long-term goal when we, as a South African, our politics is sort of summarized in one word, which is coalition. It is hard to embark on a mission, goal, strategy, building project when the government is made up of a coalition, be it national, local, whatever. And then, of course, what is characteristic and always present when coalitions are present is instability. And often or not, coalitions break down, voting and fighting happens, and is reestablished, broken down, reestablished once more. So it's quite hard to maintain one. It's quite hard to establish one. And then it's quite hard to build a plan that each and every single coalition would follow. So individually, it is very hard, basically. So you would then have or find it to no surprise that often or not, we embark on large projects. And specifically in this case, the large project that was on my mind was Jordan Hill Lewis's massive wall along the side of the highway. Now, I'm not going to get into why the wall should exist, why it shouldn't exist, what it means for the disparity between classes, is it a race thing, etc., etc. Because my main gripe is what we think about money specifically. Or the main gripe of today, I should say, is money. Because if you are building 150 million rand wall, that is obviously not popular by anybody or any stretch of the imagination. What does it mean when the government switches out and the wall has been paid for? And how do we go to solving this issue? Because let's be honest, often or not, projects are started, walls are built, and they're massive projects. So due to the timeline, construction, etc., it takes a long time. And a perfect example of this would be Donald Trump's wall. he started it, and then there were all those videos where it sort of ended out of nowhere, and then people could like kind of just walk around and do nothing about it because it was a long-term project. It was a project that probably would have required him to have his 4 years and then his second term immediately follow it, but of course he didn't. So the war was stopped. That then did nothing for the mission or the objective of the war and was just stopped in a random spot, basically, that was physically defining the border. And that is probably the perfect analogy for Cape Town's issue. Like, what does it look like? Clearly, oh, let me not jump the gun. But what does it look like when a project such as a war, in general now, such as a war, starts, 150 million is paid, and it is stopped? Like, what do we as citizens think about that? Because one, obviously, it would drive people not to really care for projects and not really want to embark projects, because we can throw numbers around in like insane numbers. Like, we're always hearing of people stealing millions, hundreds of thousands, sometimes even billions, because their actions, corruption, etc., often affect the country via a loss of billions. But because of that, and because we throw those numbers around so often, most probably multiple times per day, you become desensitized to that. But then what you don't become desensitized to is the struggle to afford things, fuel, taxes, etc. These are problems that are staples in politics, in everybody's lives, be it South African, be it whoever. So we always have those problems, and yet we always have big projects. But we don't always have government that can do the projects. It doesn't have the support, etc., etc. So now it's like a thing of, we spent 150 million, but nobody of us liked the war, hypothetically speaking. So nobody of us liked the war. That's 5 years down the line, court case after court case after court case, the war is stopped, for example. But money is spent. It's impacted the economy. It's impacted the trajectory of our financial situation. For when they do the the budget speech? Yeah, the budget speech. I forget, they call it something specifically, but let's say the budget speech. The finance minister delivers his speech. It obviously affects that. 150 million is not a small amount of money. Yes, it's an amount of money that's probably allocated to a particular ward, for example, or perhaps a particular town, because let's be honest, like, there is millions that go into wards and towns that then are meant for service delivery, etc., but are often not. But what do we feel about that? Like, what are we supposed to feel as South African citizens when massive projects are taken up and incompleted and money is spent? You can look at the transportation plan that they have now officially called off a few weeks ago, in which they had physically admitted that the transportation network that they were building in Gauteng was essentially for naught, and that was just millions and billions that was spent and is now nothing. And we just often enough read stories like that, read announcements like that, and move on with the days of our lives and stuff like that. So what do we feel like? Because I think that motivates and promotes a political apathy, a political estrangement, essentially, pushing you away from politics, because it doesn't really matter what you feel sometimes. It doesn't matter what you think and say and your opinion, because the project is taken forward, and when it eventually stops, your money is already gone, and you probably will never see that money again. And that is kind of like the reality of South Africa. because coalition governments are always going to try and come in with this picture of stability and the picture of plans and the picture of the way forward. But carrying it out in this political landscape with this many political subjects that basically could rupture a political coalition any second, it's a hard sell to any South African, especially a South African that is not into politics. But at the same time, political parties such as the DA, ANC, etc., need to face this. They need to acknowledge that this is something. And a lot of them do. But acknowledgement and rectifying this and creating a plan that many others can believe in is something that has not really been achieved afterwards. Because in our political landscape, it's hard to get a majority. It's very, very, very hard to get a majority. And most probably it will still be hard to get a majority. And politics is like that. Because we can have political opinions that are objective, and we will have those that are subjective. You will have those political actors that look at the facts, look at the past, what politicians and their parties have done, while simultaneously we'll have political parties, actors that look at what their leaders and their chosen representatives. And if the representative says, the A, B, and C is crooked and corrupt and etc. and racist, then most of the time we will not fact check that and we will believe it. So the idea of, when I put it like that, the idea of building massive projects that are meant to help society, help South Africans, kind of feels like for naught. Almost like, why should we bother? But that could change. Like, what is really, besides the option of coalitions being stable, them actually adopting a project and actually completing it, that is an option. That is absolutely an option. Yes, we may not really see it every now and again. Perhaps only when majorities are formed, such as the city of Cape Town, etc. But the other option, of course, is regulation, laws. Is there not something that we can put in writing that requires the way that municipals and the local governments are ran, that when a project is taken up for this price tag, is there no obligation that it should be completed in the set time frame? Say we are building or refixing the water infrastructure of Gauteng. No, wait, that's too big. Let's narrow down this hypothetical. City of Joburg. Like, how long would that realistically take? How much would that realistically cost? We do those numbers. They do it anyways, so we really know those numbers because they know, politicians and city councilors and stuff like that know like how much it would cost to do X, Y, and Z and how long it would take. But say now we get to this point where we physically decide to go for it. Should there not be regulation or something put into words that is lawfully binding that requires you to say that if you spend perhaps 25% of 100 million to fix the water structure, then this should be representative through 25% of the city's water structure being repaired and working perfectly fine. There needs to be objectives and and targets along the way that is sort of representing that, hey, this plan is moving forward and it's actually being achieved over the course of this coalition government. But then we can take it a step further and say that, of course, this might be a long project. In 8 years, the water infrastructure will be repaired. So then it's put into writing. It is signed by the council, and it's signed by whoever else. Let's say political leaders or something like that, that will represent the city in 4 years' time. Then, no matter who it may be, will then pick up this project and ensure that it is finished, because the tenure is 8 years. But what would the repercussions be like that? But that's my point. What is it that we can do as a society, as South Africans, that can ensure that projects are not just picked up, money spent, left, and money lost without that. What can be done to stop that? What can be done to lessen that? What can be done to hold people accountable for that? That was what was on my mind when listening to that interview, and when looking at Jordan Hill Lewis's City of Cape Town war. And I was just thinking, or listening to all these politicians talk about projects and the instability of coalitions. Like, what is it? Because coalitions may be around forever. We've never really had a majority post about it afterwards, bar one. Because it's the voter base may be shrinking because some people may be tired of politics, and that does happen. We do have political exhaustion, but it's also a question of coalitions have been existing. It has existed in the past, it has existed now, and most probably will exist in the future, because there is no majority. And I struggle to see an event that might push a majority. So, what does that then mean? What does that entail? And surely we, as South Africans, they can do something to ensure that, regardless of how unstable these coalitions are, regardless of who are in the coalitions, we can still achieve what is good for civil service and what's good for South Africans. But you let me know. I'm not a legal technique. I have no idea what that would entail. I'm just proposing it because I feel like that should be an option. There should be something that can legally obligate parties, leaders, councillors to do what is best for South Africans. And how could we put that in writing? But let me know. And as always, I'll wait for you. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.